Hello everybody, I am Satan herself, or Satan isn't herself on Twitch, and welcome to this tier list video. This one is going to be about ranking all of the Peggle Masters in Peggle Nights, specifically Peggle Nights, on how well they do in Peggle Nights, how much we like them. And I'm actually not going to be just rating them from a casual perspective, I'm also going to be rating it from a speedrun perspective, because I speedrun this game. I'm top 10, currently 7th on any percent, so I hope I know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I also wanted to say this is a 1K follower celebration video, kind of a follow-up to a video I did 2 years ago, so if you want to check out my ranking for all the Peggle Deluxe characters, and I'll also be talking about some things I would have changed from that video in this one, you can check that out. I'll have it linked, I'll have it on a card, you know, you'll be able to find it. But yeah, I promised for 1K followers on Twitch that I would follow it up, and so here we are. And yeah, I'm going to be covering them both from sort of a casual perspective and from a speedrun perspective. And last time I kind of did casual and challenges all lumped in together, but now I'm just going to talk about challenges in the context of whether we'd like to speedrun them or whether you just want to complete them, because I think that's very different. If you want to go fast on the challenges, I think your strategy is going to be a lot different from just kind of guaranteeing that you're going to be able to complete it, or at least what's most intuitive to do a certain challenge with any given Peggle master. But yeah, I guess you're probably wondering, if you already did this for Peggle Deluxe, then why the hell are you doing it for Peggle Nights? Well, there's a couple reasons for that. The first is you can see our newest master down here on the screen, Marina Squid. So they actually added an 11th master to Peggle Nights. You know, reel in all the fans. She's, spoiler alert, a good master, so I wanted to talk about her. Disregard, by the way, these imposters, these fake Peggle Masters. You might see them coming up here later, but do not pay attention to them. They are not relevant to this video. We are just going to be talking about all of these ones here that have these square portraits. But aside from that, the masters that you think you know and love from Deluxe, actually some of them changed very significantly in Nights, and that both has an impact on the casual experience of these masters and the speedrun experience of a lot of these masters. About half of them have, you know, minor to significant changes. Their powers sort of work differently in the context of Peggle Nights, which is designed very differently from Peggle Deluxe. A lot of the levels in Peggle Nights were actually made with aesthetics more so in mind than in Peggle Deluxe. In Peggle Deluxe, they created a lot of levels without any thought to how the backgrounds would look. And in Nights, they kind of did it in reverse, where the backgrounds were a little bit more of a guide to how the levels would be designed. And I think that ends up impacting the way the levels feel a lot, and how certain masters sort of react to that will change how I rate them in this game then to Peggle Deluxe. So if you watched that previous Peggle Deluxe video, do not worry, there's going to be plenty for you to learn in this one. I do recommend watching that one first, even though, again, I have some very different opinions now than I did about 2 years ago. I still recommend it. I think it's a fun video. I think it does a good job of sort of introducing this whole concept, but I also am not going to make you watch that. I want to make sure that anybody who clicks on this video knows what's going on. So I'm going to explain some of the basics of Peggle now, just so that we can all be on the same page. If you haven't played Peggle, first of all, go play it. There are 2 official free Peggle games out there right now, Peggle Extreme and Peggle World of Warcraft. Those are both real. So, you know, you can play Peggle for free. But either way, even if you've never played Peggle before, no worries, you can stick around. We've got a level. I can't see it right now, but there will be a level. And in said level, there will be a bunch of pegs. And all of those pegs will be different colored. There are 4 main colors of pegs, and they all do different things. The first one is blue pegs. Blue pegs are worth very little points, and they just kind of are there to get in your way and cause the structure of the level to be the way it is. Pretty simple. Then there's the orange pegs. The orange pegs are what you need to hit to clear the level. There's always going to be 25 in a standard level, although some challenges can have more. And you need to hit all 25 oranges with the 10 balls you get at the beginning, plus any free balls that you get throughout the course of the level to be able to move on to the next level. So that is our goal. And part of the reason that certain masters will be fast is that they can hit those oranges faster. So if I'm talking about a master that, spoiler alert, will be able to clear a bunch of oranges on her own just by hitting the green, then that's pretty good. Speaking of the green pegs, there are going to be 2 of them in each level. except for some dual mode challenges. Those are what activate the master powers. So if you're playing with Bjorn, for example, who has the ability Super Guide, when you hit a green, the next 3 turns you will be able to use Super Guide. But there are also some Peggle Masters whose abilities happen right away. So this is Bjorn. This is Splork. Splork Space Blast will go ahead and do a big radius, a big blast right around that green to every peg that is near it right away. So that's kind of a different way that greens can work. They can either work immediately or they can have delayed effect. And that will also change a lot of how you're going to use the greens and how effective they end up being in the levels. Yeah. And then finally, there's the purple peg. The purple peg is worth a lot of points, and this actually does matter in certain contexts. It doesn't really matter for clearing the level fast, except for that if you get 25k points in a single shot, you get a free ball. So that's another way to get free balls besides the ball bucket. Getting the ball in the ball bucket at the bottom of the screen will also give you a free ball. And so that can be good for survival in certain levels, especially because Peggle Nights is really difficult. So sometimes you do want those extra points to survive. Also, though, there are challenges that require getting a certain amount of points, and those can be relevant in certain categories as well as for casual play. And Peggle Nights added something that Peggle Deluxe does not have. Another big difference between these two games: ace scores. So now every single level has a specific score that you want to reach to get that ace score sort of achievement for it. So if a master is good at getting score, that might actually matter for if you're going for a category that cares about ace scores or challenges. So that's where that purple peg becomes relevant. That's where certain master powers become relevant. We'll get to triple score later. Yeah. Another element of Peggle that's really important to explain, and that will contextualize some of the things I'm going to be talking about later, is the random generation aspect. So the level's always going to have the same pegs in the same place, but they're not always going to be the same color every time you boot up a level. So you're always going to have to look at a level and sort of say, okay, here's where the oranges are this time. I'm going to go for this strategy. So that sort of like improv element is going to be really important for certain masters down the line as well. And then finally, I'll explain one more mechanic that might be relevant to what I talk about for certain masters, called style shots. So you don't just get points from hitting pegs. You totally do get points from hitting pegs. And in fact, you get more points the more oranges you hit. That's called the multiplier. You can see that little multiplier gauge on your screen right now. But there's another way to get points, and that is style shots. So style shots account for a lot of things. There's a lot of ways that you can get style shots. You can get it from big slides. It's called extreme slide. You can get it from getting about 2/5 of the remaining oranges on screen in a single shot. That's called orange attack. You can get it from going from one non-blue peg to another non-blue peg really far away on the screen. That's called a long shot. And you can also get it from certain master powers. Getting both greens in the same shot is always going to give you style points, so that's the same for everyone. But there's also certain style points that only happen from Cat Tut's power, certain ones that only happen from Claude's power, and etc., etc. So when those are relevant, I'll point them out. And I think that's about all that y'all need to know to be familiar with how Peggle works at a baseline so that we can talk about these masters. And then finally, I'm going to go ahead and talk about some categories so that y'all can be familiar with that before we start talking about the speedrun stuff. We've got any percent. Any percent is just playing the game front to back, all 60 levels, right in a row. Each master will have 5 levels all to themselves in the order that you see below on the screen, and then they will, the game will give you a 5-level gauntlet master levels challenges at the end, which will be any master you choose. You can choose any master for all 5 of those levels. So like for 12-1, most speedrunners will choose Cinderbottom, or for 12-2, many speedrunners will choose Marina, for example. But that's your choice. It's free choice. So the master levels are sort of different in that way. NG Plus category involves going back through the game and choosing any master that you want for any stage. So that will be relevant in comparing masters. Challenges, as I said before, are sort of ways to flip the game around on its head. Some of them give more oranges, some of them require more score, some of them require beating the challenge with fewer balls than you start with. There's a lot of different ones. So, you know, those are very varied. And then ace scores, I already explained before, is, you know, how much score do you get in a single playthrough of a level, and you have to get enough score to sort of clear that A score threshold. And then finally, the final thing you might do in certain speedrun categories is full clear. Full clearing is clearing every single peg in a level, and that also gives you a little 100% ribbon for that level. So all of those are potential things you might want to do in a speedrun. Of course, in a casual playthrough, you're kind of just looking to get through the levels and looking to get through the challenges, and maybe the ace scores and full clears are something you might want to do, but you're not trying to do them super fast, so that's kind of going to change how you view the masters, I think. And yeah, that's all the basics. If you're just zooming ahead because you know everything about Peggle, well, welcome back. Let's get started with our very first master, Bjorn the Unicorn, the classic. So, in our casual tier list, I am going to put Bjorn in C tier. C for Bjorn. No, that's not quite right. But anyhow, Bjorn is your starting master, and it's a really good choice for the beginning because he's got something called Super Guide. And Super Guide essentially makes it so that you can see where your next bounce is going to go off of a peg. It doesn't activate when you hit the green, but it activates on the 3 subsequent turns. So that's really useful for sort of acclimating a new player towards being able to shoot kind of correctly. So I think he's not bad in that sense, that he sort of helps the player get used to Peggle's mechanics and can sometimes make it really fun to get long shots and stuff like that. You know, he's good for style points and certain score challenges as well. Also, since Nights is really hard, sometimes they will have level designs that incorporate really hard to get pegs. Sometimes they're behind bumpers or other types of things, and Bjorn can be really helpful with that. So I'm not going to put him down in the bottom. I respect him. He's a good unicorn. But once you play the game through as a casual player, you're going to be wanting to choose other masters. There are other masters that are just more fun to play with at the end of the day. But he's not a bad one, so I'm going to give him the C tier. And then let's switch on over to our speedrun one. And I'm going to give Bjorn the honor of the exact same tier. He's just consistent all across the board, through and through. The reason that I'm going to put him here is not only because what I said before, he's not quite as impactful towards the game experience as other masters would be, but he isn't especially quick. You do have to kind of like slow down and line up your shots a little bit with him. You don't have to, but it's often tempting to, and that actually might slow down your gameplay if you're good enough to sort of see things like Bjorn lets you see them anyway. So usually not as good, although there are certain levels where high precision is really needed. For example, we do sometimes take Bjorn in the final level, 12-5 Shadow Shine, because of the bumpers that you see on screen right over there. Those can be really, really difficult to bounce off of accurately, and it can be really punishing to not do so correctly, because if you miss a peg, you might lose that ball that you shot, which, you know, can be really punishing. So Bjorn does actually have a specific use in any percent, potentially. He also does have a use in low score and style challenges still in speedruns, so he's not completely useless, so that gives him the honor of being C tier. Also, I will put on the screen the I am world record for every master when we go over to the speedrun thing, and that means individual master. So we do have categories where we do the entire any percent gauntlet, but just with one master. So you can sort of compare directly those times, and while they're not a perfect estimation of how fast each master is in relation to each other, because, you know, certain players like certain masters better, and so have optimized certain levels, or not certain levels, certain master runs better, it'll still give you sort of an idea. So, for example, Bjorn's here is 1 hour, 6 minutes, and 53 seconds right now by Whale 11. So that's kind of middle pack in terms of speed, a little bit slow. So I think C tier is really quite accurate and perfectly fine for Mr. Bjorn here. Doesn't mean we don't love ya. Just not as fast as some other masters. And then let's go back to our casual tier. And we're going to talk about Jimmy Lightning. So Jimmy Lightning is maybe one of the most iconic masters from Peggle because he is tubular and radical and super, super extreme. He will pop up in the bottom corner and say cool things when you've done style shots. He's a fun guy. He also has the power called multi-ball. And what happens with that is when you hit the green, another ball will immediately spawn out from where that green is. It sort of changes the momentum a little bit. For that second ball, but the first ball will bounce like it normally would. And yeah, that sounds really fun. You know, 2 balls falling down the screen, but unfortunately it's a little bit less effective than it sounds. Even for casual play, I'm gonna put Jimmy in the B tier, and that's not too bad. That's a decent rating. B is passing, for sure. But yeah, it sounds a little bit more fun than it is, unfortunately, and it doesn't give you a lot of control. And I find that Peggle players, when they play it casually, really like to have a lot of control or just really big flashy things happen, right? Like those are some of the coolest things about Peggle, is being able to make something cool happen or to have something cool happen. And I think Jimmy, unfortunately, sometimes fails to do that a little bit more than his power would imply that he should. So he doesn't have a ton of use for specific challenges, but he also isn't too bad. Like, he can still produce some really fun stuff, especially if you have the wherewithal to sort of reset for a green at the top of the screen. That can be really fun. So yeah, I would put Jimmy as a B tier for casual experience. For speedrun, Jimmy goes above Bjorn in the C tier. Jimmy is not particularly fast, but he's also not particularly slow. So that's why he's gonna go above Bjorn, is because that IM world record time is a lot faster, because his power actually isn't that bad for clearing levels quickly. 2 balls, while you don't have a lot of control, you can definitely reset the level for those good green generations and just strategically use that multi-ball really well as speedrunners. However, he does still go down to C tier, and the reason that Bjorn, I think, is up in C tier instead of D tier, because he really doesn't have a lot of specific use. Unless you're running IM world record, or the IM category, the individual master category for Jimmy, you're not really picking him for anything. He's not very good for challenges, he's not good for ace scores, full clears, master levels, nothing. So that, I think, bumps him down from a B tier to a C tier specifically, in my personal opinion. And that is where I will be putting Jimmy Lightning. Sorry, Jimmy fans. He's not bad. He doesn't make it down here to Agony tier. We might see some masters who might soon, but we'll see, we'll see. And then next we've got our spooky friend, Renfield. Ooh. Where does Renfield go in the casual tier? I'm sure a lot of you who've played Peggle Deluxe remember Renfield very fondly, because his power is that after he hits the green, the ball becomes spooky, and then the ball falls through the bottom of the screen and then goes back down the top and gets a whole nother round of pegs without you having to do anything. It also adds onto the score of that shot, which can be really important, especially for getting those free balls and for doing score challenges and such. That sounds really fun, really cool. But there's actually a hidden mechanic in Peggle Deluxe that makes this much more fun than it would otherwise be, and that's called Micro Zen. Micro Zen is sort of like a littler version of Master Who's power, where the game simulates a bunch of angles that your shot could potentially take, and takes one that has the highest score. We think that Renfield's power does this, but doesn't do a lot of angles, so it's not super, it's not super effective in Peggle Deluxe, but he does not do it in Peggle Nights. This is one of the major changes from Peggle Deluxe to Peggle Nights, and this is why Renfield is the 3rd master in this game instead of the 6th like he was in Peggle Deluxe, because they very intentionally nerfed him really, really hard. So even for casual play, I'm gonna put him in D tier. I think that his power is so ineffective that even casuals, after a long time of playing with Renfield, will start to notice that something is wrong. Especially if you've started with Peggle Deluxe and moved to Peggle Nights. I think the word of the day is disappointment. And that's what I think is really bad for a positive casual experience, is having players go into something with an expectation for it to be fun and then be disappointed. Nerfing him from Deluxe to Nights was really, I think, not the best play, because, again, D for disappointment. You go in expecting the same results from Renfield that you got in Peggle Deluxe, and you just don't get that. Now, granted, some of that is because Peggle Nights has some tricky level designs that don't quite play well with Renfield's power. And to be fair, some of Renfield's levels, especially 3-3, do work really well with his power. So I think he keeps himself out of the not very fun territory just because he can sometimes get you big point shots, especially in the level 3-2, and also sometimes his power is useful genuinely in levels like 3-3 for clearing the level. But otherwise, I don't think he has a lot of redeeming factors. You might pick him for certain score challenges or ace scores, but ultimately other masters are way better for that, And even if you're, again, not trying to speedrun this game, you'll figure that out after a while. I guess you all can maybe guess where Renfield's gonna land in our speedrun tier, because unfortunately when you're speedrunning, all the things I mentioned are magnified and more. You don't get control over him coming down on that second time, which means that you're just gonna get whatever Renfield wants to give you. And that can be really, really slow. Watching an entire shot of Renfield's ball just crawl down the screen or just miss everything is pure agony. That's not just disappointment, that's frustration. And that's what lands you in the agony tier, is Renfield causes frustration for speedrunners. It's also Renfield's power is genuinely quite slow. You can see that I am world record time on the screen right now. That is going to be the slowest out of all of them. So he is very, very slow. Genuinely not very fun. You don't pick him for anything, you know, willingly. So not a very good master. Sorry, Renfield fans. I get you. I get deluxe nostalgia. I understand it. I get spooky vibes. I like the Halloween aesthetic, but for speedrunning, I'm more scared of my slow times than I am of Renfield's awesomeness here, unfortunately. All right, let's move on to I Like Yarn, the Cat Tut. This character, Cat Tut, when you hit the green, will make a pyramid around the ball bucket. So it'll make the ball bucket have these like big slopes. The shape of the ball bucket actually changes very slightly from Peggle Deluxe to Peggle Nights, fun fact. It shouldn't matter a whole lot for casual gameplay. It sort of matters for one master that we're going to be talking about later, but I'm not sure if it affects the pyramid or not, but I don't think it does, as far as I remember. I think the pyramid's good old pyramid, but either way, this has two main side effects. The first is that your ball can kind of roll down that pyramid on the side and then roll up and get into the free ball bucket more often. In theory, it's supposed to give you more free balls. The second thing that it can do is that the ball can bounce off of that pyramid and get more pegs. So like, especially at the bottom of the screen, that can happen. Unfortunately, I think that secondary mechanic that I just mentioned, that bouncing thing, isn't really taken advantage of by Peggle Nights level designs. I actually think Peggle Deluxe thought a little bit more about this for specifically Cat Tut and made some levels for Cat Tut, or even just had other levels that took advantage of that mechanic a little bit more. I'll flash some on screen that I think are good. Although Peggle Nights does get a little bit of a point for Cat Tut because Peggle Nights is really hard. So those free balls actually are pretty important, and that is why I am going to put Cat Tut in the C tier for casual behind Bjorn. I think Cat actually does bring a lot of relief to casuals, because Nights is once again really, really hard. If you're not playing it with a ton of background knowledge about the game, which most people don't, and that is completely fine, you kind of want masters that are going to help you get through those levels, and Cat Tut does offer some reprieves in the form of free balls. So I think Cat Tut gets to go in C tier for that. You might pick Cat Tut for certain challenges that are really difficult. I can see that happening. So, you know, C for challenges, K for Cat Tut. Very cool. Okay. Unfortunately, Cat does land himself a spot, though, in the agony tier on speedrunning. And honestly, objectively, Cat should maybe go in low D. But it is such a frustrating experience to have your ball bounce on Cat Tut's pyramid for 10,000 years that I think that the experience of running Cat Tut is so painful that they land themselves in the agony tier, unfortunately. Even though they're so cute. Like, I love Cat Tut's design. It is so adorable. If PopCap made plushes of Cat Tut, I would snap one up, despite how I feel about running him, her. There's no official pronoun for Cat Tut, by the way. I've looked for a long time. Them. Yeah, it's just super frustrating. It's a very slow master. You can see that IM time right now. Pretty darn slow. Sorry, Cat. I get you, Cat fans, but not our favorite for speedrunning. Now we get a character that really shouldn't appear this soon in the game. We're gonna have our very first high tier character, Splork. And Splork, I'm just gonna spoil it right now, is gonna land themselves in A tier for casual play. Splork is really, really fun to play with. That Space Blast ability, which is where your ball hits the green and it gets a big radius of pegs around it, is just really immediately satisfying to use. They also give Splork some pretty decent levels for this power, I think, especially 5-4 feels really, really good to blow up that whole center thing of pegs with. And Splork's pretty useful for most levels in Nights, because Nights has a lot of these sort of clustered peg designs. So if you're electing to use Splork for things like score challenges, you're probably going to have a pretty decent time. So I'm going to go ahead and put Splork up there in A tier for casual. It's just plain fun. Spadow, kablooey, powy. I'm saying PVZ words. That's fine. I also want to address a quick myth that went around the speedrunning community for a long time, and I don't remember off the top of my head if I mentioned it in my previous video, but I might have. Who knows? Which was that we thought that Splork's blowy-uppy radius was lower in Peggle Nights. We thought it was smaller. It's not. It's actually the exact same. Peggle Nights just has different level designs, and it feels a little bit different to use Splork. I don't think much worse, though. I think Splork is really fun in both games. Pretty big fan. And speaking of fun for a speedrunner, I would also put Splork in the A tier for Nights. Splork is going to be our first individual master that is going to go sub-hour for the world record right now, which can tell you that Splork is really fast. I want to bring up that we have 60 levels in the entire Peggle Nights game. If you think about each level taking on average about a minute and 5 seconds, we'll say, for Nights, then being able to go lower than an hour, which would be an average of a minute per level, is pretty impressive. So Splork is pretty fast. That's a good rating for Splork there. I will say, even though Splork is fast, you don't tend to choose Splork over other masters for certain things like challenges, or ace scores. Sometimes you do. It definitely does happen, especially because of a mechanic called the multiplier and how score works. So I'll go into a little bit more about score. Your score per shot is actually the amount of pegs that you hit multiplied by the points that you get per peg hit, all added together. So because let's say that you're at 0 times multiplier, each blue is worth 10, each orange is worth 100, each green is also worth 10, and each purple is worth 5,000. So if you got the purple and you got 1 orange, that would land you with 5,000 plus 100 times 2, which of course is 10,200 points. So, you know, if you get a lot of pegs all together, then you might end up getting a really big score in a single shot. And Splork is really, really good for that, especially if you wait later for that multiplier to get higher, which it does when you hit more oranges in the level. If you hit a big shot when there's high multiplier, you might get even more score. So Splork is sometimes chosen for things that rely on score because of that, sometimes for full clears just to get rid of really big chunks of pegs, but usually you'll pick other masters. But Splork makes it to A tier, kind of already on their own merits, because they're just fast and a lot of fun to use. All right, who have we got next? It's Claude the Lobster, our favorite French guy, who has a really fun dream in Peggle Nights, by the way. If you've never played Peggle Nights, I highly recommend it. It's super fun. It's got a lot of really cute character dialogue. The levels are really, really fun. I think even though I described them before as being designed a little bit more aesthetically, I still think they're a ton of fun. And I think that a lot of people would have a very good time with Peggle Nights if they gave it a shot. But either way, the main gimmick of Peggle Nights is that all of the Peggle Masters are having dreams of what they would do if they were not a Peggle Master, and Claude's is becoming a French kaiju. I'll let you see the level backgrounds for yourselves, but they're really, really fun. This is my endorsement for Nights being just such a fun, cute experience. Speaking of fun experience, I actually think Claude lands himself in the B tier casually, because what Claude does to the level is that when you hit a green, the next 3 turns, including the one that you're in right now, are going to have flippers. And the flippers basically turn Peggle into a pinball experience. You can control the flippers, you can flap the ball around if it goes near those flippers. And that's really fun. It offers a lot of control, especially in casual play, and it offers some survivability. So even though Nights, I think its levels don't take a ton of advantage of Claude's ability, I actually think Claude's ability is probably better suited for deluxe levels. It still offers some survivability on Nights levels, which are really hard on average. So Claude is kind of welcome in this sense. Yeah, I do unfortunately think that in Peggle Nights specifically, a lot of Claude's levels are really poorly designed for his power, especially 5-4. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Some of them are better though. But I think you'll probably find yourself using Claude in some challenges or NG+ if you play casually, just to have some fun. See how long you can flip that ball around, how many points you can get. There's a style shot that you can only get with Claude, so, you know, there's a lot of fun to potentially be had with Claude if you're not trying to go fast. I think he's a really good casual master experience. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said if you are speedrunning with Claude. Claude is pretty slow. One of the slowest characters, in fact, in the I Am World Record is actually a bit slower than Cat Tut's right now. It's just, Claude offers a little bit more control. The deal with Cat Tut and Renfield as opposed to Claude is that you really have no control what's going on with these masters. But Claude, you can hold the flippers up to make it so that the ball sort of doesn't get caught in them. You can flip if you want to, and if you're good at it, you might be able to get some advantage from that. So, you know, I think that the experience of running Claude is a little bit better. Even though Claude is comparably slow to Cat Tut, I would put Claude just a little bit higher. But that doesn't mean that he's not really slow and kind of painful to use. Sorry, Lobster. Yep. Au revoir. All right, on to one of the most fun characters in the game, one that I actually have a little button of right here. By the way, I didn't mention this when we got to Jimmy, but I've made some Peggle merch, actually, that you can check out in the store link below. I think it's really fun. Barely any Peggle merch out there, so if you want to get yourself some Peggle merch and also have it be Peggle Pride merch, because my headcanon is that Tula is a lesbian. I think I'm right about this. You can go ahead and check that out. But either way, merch plug done. Let's go ahead and see where Tula lands. Well, Tula's power is flower power. What this means is that if you hit a green, Tula will hit 20% of all remaining oranges on the level just immediately, right away. Super fun, lots of feedback there. However, it is based on proximity, so it's the oranges that are closest to that green that you hit. I think this alone lands Tula a strong A tier in casual. Even though it's not a ton of control, like we'll see with some later masters, she's just really, really effective. In fact, you could even argue an S tier for a casual experience. I think that this will be a point of contention for individuals of how fun they find Tula personally. Obviously, Tula is a really intuitive pick for just clearing levels. She's also a really intuitive pick for the challenges that require you to clear more oranges than normal, because, you know, that percentage is really, really going to help out in those scenarios. She's good for score, she's good for clearing. The only thing that you might not want to pick her for is full clearing, because you might clear too early. And that's kind of a casual and speedrun problem. So I don't think that really affects those very differently. But yeah, she's really fun to use and very effective. I would say a good casual experience. Tula actually gets a buff though in the speedrunning world because of a hidden mechanic and a change from Peggle Deluxe to Peggle Nights that actually informs a lot of how I feel about her in relation to these two games. By the way, quick retcon to the last video. I put Tula as an A tier in the last video. I would now put her at a low S tier in Peggle Deluxe, but in Peggle Nights, she's a high to mid S tier because of this one very important change. Tula will always get 2 orange pegs minimum in Peggle Nights. What this means is that you can leave an orange till the end of the level and get 2 pesky oranges that might be somewhere really, really hard to get. You can even leave both greens for the end of the level and get 4, which is actually very, very important. You would think that getting it early would be better because 20% accounts for more of the orange pegs, but actually a lot of your time is going to go towards getting pegs that are kind of out of the way, that are harder to get. So if you save those greens for the end and use Tula for those difficult to reach pegs, you'll actually go a lot faster. And this makes Tula one of the absolute fastest masters in the game. Her I Am World Record is the second fastest right now, and was the fastest for a very long time. You pick her in NG+ a lot to go really fast in a lot of levels. And you might pick her for challenges as well, in challenge levels. Sometimes even ace score potentially. So she has a lot of uses in a lot of different categories. She's super, super fast. Her levels she's very fast in too. She has great levels. Tula has some of the best levels in all of Peggle Nights, and I think they synergize with her power really, really well. Especially if you have speedrun strategies that take advantage of those level designs. Highly recommend watching a speedrun of Tula. She's so much fun to play with and so much fun to watch. One of the best speedrun masters for sure. Yep. The only reason she's not A tier is she's not the absolute undisputed S tier queen will be coming up shortly. All right. Here is Cinderbottom. I'm sure you remember Cinderbottom if you played Peggle. He lets you shoot a big ol' fireball through a bunch of pegs. Big ol' fireball. And Cinder doesn't experience a lot of changes from Peggle Deluxe to Peggle Nights, so no real need to talk about that, except for the fact that Peggle Nights has a lot of different level designs from Peggle Deluxe, and I actually think Peggle Nights' level designs sometimes lend themselves a lot better to Cinder's power. Because there are a lot of clusters of pegs or lines of pegs a lot of the time that will be hard to clear if you don't have a big old fireball. Because of that, and also just the fun aspect of shooting a fireball through a bunch of pegs and bouncing it off of the ball bucket, which gets a little cover when you get Cinder, I'm going to make Cinder the first casual S tier. I think people just have a lot of fun with using him. Great for certain blocky level designs like 8-1, which I'll show on the screen right now. He's not perfect, and a lot of casuals also, I think, will disagree because he's very skill-based. So I think it also ends up being that, like, a lot of people will have their own individual preferences on Cinder, whether they like him more or not. But I think on average, if you play with him enough, even if you're not trying to go fast, you'll really enjoy the Cinder experience. S for Cinder, not really, that would be C, but he doesn't deserve a Z. Also, in Peggle Nights, his dream is to become a firefighter. Very funny. And for the speedrun side of things, yep. Unfortunately, sorry Tula, you got dethroned. Cinder's just a little bit better. It's really, really close between these two. These are amazing Peggle Nights masters. And you will see another master later that is going to try to compete with these two. We are going to have another one that is going to be very, very strong. But Cinder is super fast, the fastest IM time right now. You can see it on the board. And if you know how to use him, the skill ceiling is the roof. You can learn how to use Cinder extremely effectively and tear through levels. One really important use of Cinder that casuals will not know about, but speedrunners do, is wall fireballs. And this is tech that was actually discovered after my previous video of the Peggle Nights thing, but it does, or the Peggle Deluxe rating, but it does work in Peggle Deluxe too. So, a little bit of a follow-up to that video. But if you aim all the way in the right or left side of the screen, and you wait for the ball bucket to just touch the left or right side and then fire, your fireball will create a diagonal, bounce off, and create another diagonal bounce. And that actually ends up clearing a lot of stages. It's a little bit more useful in Deluxe because Nights has a lot of levels with blockers that sort of make it not a viable strategy, but it's still really useful in Peggle Nights, especially in the early levels if you're picking Cinder for something like New Game Plus, or NG Plus, as I've been referring to it. Yeah, so that's really, really useful, but you can also just wing it, pun intended. Really, really strong. Really great for full clears. Sometimes ace scores. 12-1 is usually people will pick Cinder for 12-1 and challenges. He's useful across the board. He's fast. He's strong. He's a little bit harder to use than Tula, of course. Tula is a little bit more automatic. And you can get yourself into specific sticky situations with Cinder if you don't know how to use him very well. And also there are certain levels where Cinder is a genuinely bad pick. There are certain few levels here and there in Nights where I would say never pick Cinder. So, you know, there's some variability there. Cinder is not as good of an on-average pick as Tula is usually, but he is still the king of the speedrun masters. All right, but that doesn't mean we aren't going to have 3 remaining very interesting masters to talk about. first of all, being the Warren Rabbit, our Warren gay. That's the joke we have for him, is that he is gay, and he is awesome for doing that. Anyhow, with Warren, you never know what you're going to get. His power is Lucky Spin. When you hit the green, there will be a wheel that shows up on the screen, and it's gonna have 4 options. The 2 ones to both sides are going to be Warren's original power, Magic Hat. The top one is going to be triple score, which will triple the score of your shot that you're doing now and the next shot. And the bottom one is going to be any master that you've unlocked already. So if you're playing Warren in any percent, you get access to every master that we've already put on the screen, but you aren't going to know which one you could potentially get, and that's only a 1 in 4 as well. So it's somewhat unreliable, somewhat unpredictable, but also randomness is kind of fun, right? That's the thing. You might spin the wheel and get something you really want at that moment. You don't know. And triple score can be really, really fun because it can give you big score amounts. It can also be really useful for certain challenges. You might notice that. You might go, oh, wow, this challenge wants me to get 750k points. That's a lot. Maybe I should try to use Warren. And that would indeed be the speedrunner's pick as well. So a little bit of overlap there. The hat power is really good. It's kind of like a hitbox extender on the top of the ball. And it's actually kind of deceptively good, I think. This is the one thing that I think holds Warren back a little bit, besides the randomness, is that Hat isn't as obviously good, but it is very good. If you know how to use Hat, you can do a lot of good stuff with it. And also, Peggle Nights is a very big change from Peggle Deluxe with Warren. This is another one of these masters that has changed, which is that you get Magic Hat half the time instead of 1/4 of the time now. In Peggle Deluxe, one of those Magic Hat options was extra ball. You just got another ball immediately, which is good and convenient, but Magic Hat's a lot more fun. So serious buff. This brings Warren up to a low A tier in my opinion for casual play. Randomness is fun, Magic Hat is fun, and you get to play more with it now, and you get access to Cinder, which you wouldn't have had in Peggle Deluxe during any percent play, because in Peggle Deluxe, Warren came before Cinder. So all of these things, I think, make Warren more fun to play with in Peggle Nights. His levels are also easier. In Peggle Deluxe, they are notoriously difficult. All of them. So I think Warren really lands himself in the A tier. A for improvement from the Peggle Deluxe experience. Unfortunately, I can't quite say the same for Peggle Nights, but Warren does get a huge boost, once again, from the Peggle Deluxe speedrun experience. I think I probably rated him a little bit too harshly in my Peggle Deluxe video. He's not as bad, but he's still pretty annoying to play with from a speedrunning perspective in Peggle Deluxe, because all 4 of his options are pretty different, and you really, especially for his levels, if you're playing any percent, you really want something good, and you're not always gonna get something good. So, you know, that's kind of tough. In Peggle Nights, we have much better ways to deal with his levels. You get Hat half the time, which is a really good and fun power to use, and you can possibly get Cinderbottom. So it's just in any percent, and you can even get all the masters, of course, if you're playing an IM run of him. So a lot better. He's a lot faster. He's a lot more fun to use. I think he lands himself solidly in that middle B tier because the randomness is still pretty difficult to deal with, but you do go faster with him, and you do pick him for certain score challenges and ace scores. That triple score can be really, really useful. And even if you don't get triple score, as a speedrunner, you have lots of ways to make points from your own sort of like knowledge of the game and being able to do it yourself. So, and Hat can be really helpful for that too. So I think Warren lands himself a nice solid B tier. Big improvement, B for big, from Peggle Deluxe. Finally, the last original master, Who the Owl. This is the aimbot master. Everybody who plays Peggle and gets to this point will remember that you get basically an aimbot, and it's not quite basically an aimbot. What happens is if you hit the green, your next shot becomes what's called a Zen shot. And what happens with that is you can aim anywhere on the board, and then the game will do that simulation angle thing. It'll sort of simulate all the little angles around where you shot and pick the one that has the highest score. Technically, you can get the best shot out of those. It will say no improvement if you do that, but otherwise it will give you a little idea of how much it improved your shot by doing a percentage. It can go all the way from 25 to 500 if I remember correctly, percent improvement, and if it's beyond 500%, which is just straight up a mathematical score calculation, it'll say maximum Zen achieved. It also does take into account free balls. Free balls are taken into account in whose calculation, but we're not quite sure exactly how heavily they weight. If that's not true, I'll add an addendum. But yeah, as far as I remember, it's relevant, but not super, super relevant. It's mostly about score. And of course, I think as a casual, that's a ton of fun. You want shots that get a lot of points. And they often do help you win the level because oranges are worth more than blues. So who lands himself a nice solid, S for solid, S tier out of the casual play. I think a little bit under Cinder, but they're pretty close. You definitely think of who when you're firing up a level, I think, a lot of the time for who's gonna get me through this. Who's gonna... Wow, I just got myself. Anyway, yeah, who's gonna get me through this? Who the owl? Good for score challenges, great for ace scores, good for just generally getting yourself through tough spots. I think who is definitely a high tier choice, and also you get to say you're playing with aimbot, which is funny. However, some casual players won't actually enjoy that experience as much. They'll think, but I want to make the cool shots. I want to make shots that actually win me the level. So that's, I think, why who is just a little bit under Cinder, because Cinder has more player control aspect. However, for a speed run, unfortunately, who drops down to a high A tier. And that's not for lack of some amount of player control, actually. The reason, of course, that he does is because you don't get as much player control as you would like, because it picks a new angle for you. You know, speedrunners are already looking to pick the best angles already, so it's a little bit hard to justify that over something that might give you an additional benefit like Tula or Cinder. However, you can sort of soft manipulate who a little bit and make him better for your speedrun experience. The way you can do that is that you can aim close to where that purple is, because whose calculation is so score dependent, and because purples are worth so much score, who will often try to find a shot that goes for that purple. So if you aim close to that purple as a speedrunner, then you're kind of guaranteeing a better shot from who. You're kind of saying, yeah, you go hit that purple, and then you go hit a bunch of oranges. And then you get me a free ball, all that stuff. Another thing that does make who a pretty decent speedrun experience is that there are a lot of Peggle Nights levels with moving pegs, and moving pegs are really difficult for speedrunners to deal with because they ruin all of our consistent shots. Because Peggle it has a deterministic physics system, you can always tell what a shot is going to do if you line it up the same way and you have no moving elements to get in the way. But unfortunately, there are some levels, especially who's levels in the late game, that have a lot of moving pegs, and who is just better at dealing with those a lot of the time, because he can simulate angles that you just simply wouldn't have even been able to see. So he's pretty good. You might pick him sometimes in NG+, if you're dealing with a moving pegs level. You might pick him in certain other circumstances like challenges, but generally who is not quite as good as the top masters here for speedrunning. And it can be argued even that Splork could be above him. It's hard to say. Their times are super close in the world record right now, so, you know, very, very hard to say between these two. Comment down below if you put who and Splork in the boxing ring, who would win? Which one would kill the other one? Oh no, I said who would win. I spoiled it. I'm joking. Either one of them could definitely win. And then finally, the one you've all been waiting for. It is Marina Squid. She's the new master to Peggle Nights. They didn't have her before this one. Wowee. How would we get along without our bisexual squid? Well, anyways, she's here. Her power is Electro Bolt. What this means is when you hit a green, your next shot will be an Electro Bolt shot. What that will do is the very first peg you hit in that shot will make an Electro Bolt zappy line through a bunch of pegs to the ball bucket. So it kind of relies on ball bucket timing a little bit similarly to Cinder's, but even more so. For Cinder, you can shoot a shot and just not hit the ball bucket if you don't want to. But for Marina's, it completely depends on the ball bucket. So you have to kind of pay some attention to that and make good lines. Luckily, Peggle Nights knows that players need to learn how to do this. So the Marina levels have some really obvious lines to use. So they teach you pretty organically, I think, how Marina's power works, and then you can kind of just go to town with it for the rest of your experience. And I think Marina's a ton of fun to use. She will be your go-to as a casual for a lot of things, including those ace scores and challenges that we've mentioned before. Even full clears maybe, you might want to pick her. And especially the master levels. There's especially the 3 middle master levels, I think have level designs that are really intuitive for Marina. They have these big lines that are really easy to hit with her. So I think because of that, and because of how effective and fun her ability is to use, she gets that secondary S tier just below Cinder, maybe even higher. You know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna crown her the best casual experience. I think Marina is really in the middle between Cinder and Tula of appeal, I think. You do have a lot of control with her Electro Bolt power, you definitely do. But after that ball hits that first peg, it's still gonna go get more pegs. So you kind of have that also like your own shot and also an extra cool bonus of that shot. And I think that that's just such a cool, fun experience. Kind of melds the appeal of Cinder and other masters like Tula and Splork. And I think she's just such a go-to for lots of things. She's shiny, she's new, they want you to use her for the master levels. You just have a good time if you put Marina Squid on the screen. That's what I'm gonna say. And she does earn a fellow S tier as a speedrun master as well. Unfortunately, she doesn't quite make it past Tula or Cinder. It's really close though. She's really good. She's the 3rd fastest IM. You can see that time on the screen right now, and I think that's probably about where she's gonna stay. Because you do still use her for a lot of those scenarios. Some runners will still pick other masters in the master levels, especially Tula is a very popular pick as well for those middle master levels that I described. Some will even choose Marina for the final level though. So, you know, it's up to the individual runner preference. There isn't a best TM runner for or master for all of those. But you still do choose her for those master levels. You'll choose her for certain levels in NG+, and you'll certainly choose her for certain challenges as well. So she's very useful, she's very fast, she's a lot of fun to use, and as I said before, you can get a lot going with her in a single shot. The only real like downside to Cinder in terms of shot efficiency is that his shot is entirely a fireball, whereas Marina's is both the shot that you're already gonna do and that bonus from the Electro Bolt. So if you're a speedrunner, you can use that to your advantage really well and make it so that you survive more levels more often. And yeah, that's kind of where I'd put Marina. Those are my final tier lists. Let's go over them again. Over here in casual, nobody made it down here to the not very fun category. That's because Peggle is fun, including Peggle Nights. Peggle Nights gets a bit of a tough rap because it is harder than Peggle Deluxe, but I think it's just about as fun, especially if you stick with it. And I think most of the masters are pretty good in Peggle Nights. Unfortunately, I think they did seriously nerf Renfield for no real reason, but they made Warren and Tula so much more fun to use. And so I think for that, they really improved things. And added Marina, who is a ton of fun to use. So definitely, I think an overall improvement on the masters side for a casual experience. I highly recommend Peggle Nights if you haven't played it. Yes, this is a Peggle Nights sponsored and shilled video. That is a joke. They didn't, PopCap did not talk to me about my Peggle Nights content as much as I wish they would. Oh well, what can you do? But either way, yep, that's Marina up there. Good job. Big wins on the casual front, and sorry, F Renfield, you are not fun to play with. And then for the speedrun side, we have a different crowned king on the speedrun side, and that is Cinder. It's really close. This is a really close two-way race. These two masters really kind of make up the NG+ route. You use Marina sometimes. Some people will even use these two sometimes, but these two are really the crown jewels. They kind of balance each other out and sort of make the speedrunning experience really fun, I think, in Peggle Nights, because they just offer such different things. So you can choose one for one circumstance and one for the other. Tula's really reliable. You can use her for kind of anything. Cinder's kind of specialized and skill-based. So they kind of end up making it really fun. And Marina's hanging out too. She's definitely part of the gang. Unfortunately, Cat Tut and Renfield, really not fun to use. Not fun. Not fun. Although some runners like to give themselves a challenge. If you are one of them, you know who you are. Good job. And that's about all I had to say. I will shout out the Peggle community. We are such a dedicated speedrun community. I'm a mod on the Peggle Speedrun Discord. If you want to try your hand at Peggle speedrunning, we have so many good resources out there for you. I have a whole entire speedrun tutorial for how to run Peggle Deluxe and Peggle Nights out right now on my YouTube channel. So if you want to get started, those are right there for you. There are also some really great beginner documents of like strategies and written examples of how to get started with the game. So I highly recommend coming to our Discord and asking us for resources, or going in that speedrunning tools channel that we have up at the top. And then you'll be able to get yourself started. We would absolutely love to see more runners in the community, so please come and hang out with us, or just talk about Peggle. If you like Peggle, you will find like-minded people. We are always doing something funny and new with this game, and with the entire Peggle series as a whole. So come find me. Also, if you want to see a Peggle Night speedrun right now, I did a run on Flame Fatales, which is the GDQ affiliated group for women and femmes, last year at Flame Fatales 2023 of Peggle Nights Any Percent. And while I think that run is like not my best work personally, I still think it's a really fun time and a really good showcase of that run. So I will put that in the description as well as in a card. I'll put all these things I'm talking about in the description and also in cards at the end of the video, so you can go ahead and click on them. So if you want to see that, I highly recommend it. It's super fun. You can also just check out any other speedrun on my channel, or on SRC, or on people's Twitches. There's a lot of people that speedrun this game. I also want to just shout out the 2 people who have been getting those IM world records throughout this entire video, Richa and Whale11. They are at the top of Peggle Nights speedrunning right now. They both do such incredible work. They are so talented and so fast. So big props to y'all. Props to anybody who runs Peggle Nights. I love you. Y'all are all awesome. And also thank you for making it to the end of this video, and thank you for watching. This was so fun. Yeah, make sure to click that subscribe button and stick around if you want more Peggle content. I am always going to be here playing Peggle. So thank you so much for watching. I've been Satan herself, or Satan isn't herself on Twitch. Bye-bye.